Yo, this is Alu. You got pretty big balls to watch Thorin's YouTube videos.
The issue of whether or not there should be any use of private team communications, the recording from TeamSpeak or whatever voice client that Pro CS players use during tournaments, is a very touchy one for players. But it can also potentially be a game changer for the analysts and the broadcast if it is handled well. There are a variety of possibilities as to how you do this and how it has in fact been implemented in the past. You can go with the approach where you just straight up release all the comms. These were released as VODs famously by ESL, for example, in 2015. They experimented with it at ESL 1 Katowice, the major, and the first ESL ESEA Pro League Season 1 finals or whatever it was. So for example, any person could go watch the VOD. For certain teams, it was super fascinating. I often reference the Fnatic comms, where you could see how very, very calm they were, how little Pronax actually said, how little they said when they would rotate and play TT side. Cloud9 obviously speaking English. You could hear Sean Gares. Actually, that ESEA, ESEL, ESL Pro League run was a lot of what built him the fame that he was this genius caller, because people could hear him like reading the game, that some of the players on his team didn't always know the strat, etc., and he was having to correct them on the fly. And obviously, he was calling a potential series win over Fnatic. Didn't actually come through in the end. The problem is, even at those events, it caused drama. Like, there was a match between Envy, the French team, and Cloud9, and what happened was, some American fans were like, well, what's Envy saying? And then they got their comms, and some people translated it from French, and it turned out, during the warm-up, they were saying things that the way you describe it now would be, were politically incorrect. They were shit-talking, only among themselves, on their comms, about the opposing team, in the same way as if you've ever seen documentaries, a sports star might be talking shit in the locker room or in the pre-game, like, let's get these guys, fuck them up, they're boop, all sorts of shit. So the problem there is that caused a big drama spark, and then people on Reddit were going crazy. I mean, funnily enough, I've always pointed out, we're just lucky that no one in the CIS region gave translation for what the Na'Vi comms were like. Because, put it this way, I'll just say this. If you've noticed how many times Simple's been banned from Twitch, like, way worse than that on the whole politically correct angle. So the issue there is, it causes drama, and that's something those players are talking about in private. So then you go, understandably, players pushed back at that, teams pushed back at that. The TO even thought, like, yeah, come think of it, we are putting them in a bad spot here. They didn't know those comms were necessarily public. So then you go to partial release. Now, Blast is a great example of this. They'll use some clips, like maybe in a 1v2 or something. They'll have the guy like, he's behind box, oh, 2v1 or whatever. Or maybe you have people, yeah, at the end of the round, oh, lol, like, what are you doing with the shotgun, bro, or something, you know, for comedic purposes or just to add some extra atmosphere. Obviously, people cheering when they've been in a big round is pretty cool, right? We don't normally get to see that in Counter-Strike because we're in the game and we just hear the casters do that for us. Then you have what I would say, spoiler, is probably the one I would prefer, which is you never use the comms generally on the broadcast. They're just for the analysts. And as I alluded to, that's my preference. And we'll get to that in a minute. So if we go through the three different categories, full release, listen, it was fascinating. And especially when I didn't work those ESL events, I wanted to just in the comms. I want to hear what they were saying in those rounds. But I'll fully acknowledge, I think I gave away way too much. I'm amazed, and this would shock you, how few of the other teams who played in those tournaments went and studied those VODs. Most of them didn't have proper coaches, didn't have analysts. The players just don't care. To this day, there are massive superstar players who will be in top 10 lists every year, never watch demos, would never try and study that. Just, who gives a fuck? They wouldn't realise, like, you could figure out which person has the bad comms, like what area is more of a weak point, which guy doesn't communicate well in a 1vx situation, like all sorts of factors that you could, 2v2 scenario maybe for that one. These things could help a lot. They just didn't make use of it, but that's the point. They could. And so for me, giving away everything to the public is not only way too revealing and can get you in trouble for having competitive spirit, gallows sense of humour. By the way, that's literally how men in all of history have bonded, how they perform an in-group. Like, it's us against the world. It's a way of getting out, like, psychic, I mean, you could almost say violence in a sense, but I would never say that about speech. Let's say psychic toxicity, whatever term you want to use, aggression. So then you can focus on the game. So I would just say the entire factor for me is, yeah, we should just stay away from that. Like, there's no real reason to want to have that. I don't think it's really what we want. So I would say keep that away. Then we go to the option of the partial one. It's the one that most broadcasters are going to want to use Because listen, they put it in the contract. They say to the teams, like, you have to agree to some of this because, we need to create contact. We're losing money on these tournaments. You're losing money as teams. Let's make content around the matches. So brilliant matches can make us all money and fans watching, but also content can. And you know what? It makes the analysts more interesting and these clips are more interesting. It's all something extra we can do, right? Yeah, I get that. And in theory, I agree. Like, if I could trust every TO and every person in production and every analyst, yeah, you know what I'd say? That's fine. Like, just be responsible with it. Have your guidelines, and then let's go ahead and let's only feature the moments we can feature or allude to things, but let's never risk it for the players. The problem is that word I just said, risk. And in my opinion, partial release in the way that it's done at the moment, where sometimes you get some things from around that was active play and wasn't just cheering or something funny, I still think the risk is too much. Because essentially, here's the issue. They don't run that by the player because they can't. It's on the fly. It's a production guy, and I've seen all the production guys. There aren't many production guys who are anywhere close to the level of analysts. So what can happen is, it's very easy for a production guy to fuck that up. I mean, this happened with Blast. Very recently in Blast Fall, there was a match where G2 played against, I think it was Big, and when they were going into the second map, which was Dust 2, they put out between the maps a clip of Cold Zera laughing at the end of, I think it was Nuke, and saying something like, I have no anti-strats for Dust 2, because he'd just taken over as the IGL because Big Ed Nico had gone to G2. Right? In that scenario, you might think because he's laughing, it's a fun moment, we can include that. Big is a team that prepares very well. They have analysts, they have coaching staff, they have people, even they have social media people who are very active. Like, do you think that they didn't see that clip and that there's no potential with an online game that they could just message their players and go, by the way, Cold Zero actually doesn't have any reads on us on this map. Like, he can run a lot of the basic stuff. Like, don't worry about him doing like counter setups and boosts. That could literally have impacted the influence of the results of that game. And I believe off the top of my head, I think actually FaZe did lose that map. That was one that they lost. So the issue there is, it's really hard for the production guy to know when he's slightly gone over bounds, but when he does, there is no deleting it like they did, or apologize. I don't know if they ever did apologize, but even if you did apologize, that doesn't undo the damage. Essentially, you can't put that genie back in the bottle when you let him out. So you have to know, I have to be extra conservative letting any of this stuff out in case it's going to be flawed. Even though, yes, that made for a cool little angle for the fans to watch going into the next match. So to me, the partial release, and you might sometimes see this on Flashpoint, I generally said I wasn't a fan of it, but I don't decide every single thing. I'm fine with you releasing stuff that's only funny stuff and banter. Or a reaction like, well, you're so sick, bro. That's fine in my opinion. Now, someone might say, it's the obvious thing they're going to say. If you've ever followed League of Legends, you'll know that they have tons of that stuff. If you ever watched those True Sight documentaries for Dota 2, you'll know they show all sorts of conversations they're having and things they say and things in the moment. But here's the problem. In League of Legends, in MOBAs, what they are saying in comms compared to CS is of minimal value in terms of like giving away secrets. They're just saying stuff like, I think we could go for the Baron now. Like, let's rotate. Whoa, target this guy. Whoa, watch out for the ult down, flash down, like whatever it might be. Like blinked in or whatever. Like in that scenario, the other team could already have guessed that. There's nothing special being given away there. You could maybe get a sense of like which players do some of the calls, but even then it's not like Counter-Strike. We're doing tactics. We're doing mid-round calls. We're doing specific bomb site setups and trying to figure out where the weak spots are. So in my opinion, the game's just way too different. That's also why, in my opinion, in those games, they overvalue the comms. Comms are important, but like put it this way, in League of Legends, 2 of the last 3 world champions were Chinese teams that featured 2 Korean players in the solo lanes, and one of them, the Shy, definitely doesn't speak fluent Chinese and couldn't speak to his teammates. Didn't matter, they won the tournament anyway. Now, the idea you could have someone in Counter-Strike win a major when like the rest of his team speak Danish, and then let's say I'd have to pick something ridiculous in this one that wouldn't work, obviously, because most people speak English as a second language. So let's say this guy is from China and doesn't speak English, and then basically they're just communicating in Danish, he communicates in Chinese, and then win a major. Like, you can't even conceive of that. Like, that he'd have to basically be simple times 4, and they'd have to be really willing to just work without him having any comms. So, like, you already saw what happened with Bentet and Tai Lu when they had comms issues. Like, I don't think it could ever happen. So, in my opinion, you can't contrast it to the League One where they do the mic check and they reveal all that stuff. So, it's a different scenario. So, now let's go to what is my favoured one, and what I'm essentially going to argue, and I hope people are listening at these TOs, is what I think you should do, and I'm going to try and implement at Flashpoint, which is I want the limited release, which essentially means not for you, just for the analysts. That's the only person I want it for, is me and the other analysts, to inform us, to let us actually know what is going on in the game, how the team functions, how they're thinking about the game. That way, we're not only speculating on those aspects or speculating on what exactly role is this guy playing or how much say does he have in it or how does this IGL implement his style or what is the flow of the game for this team. Oh, well, I think maybe he made a bad call from Catwalk that actually a guy was free. Now, I don't think on the broadcast you should be saying, well, I heard on the comms actually it was the other guy. No, what I think should happen is it should inform you. And then when you speculate, well, I'd speculate like they probably had some kind of disconnect between two positions, maybe they didn't get the info or maybe they called the wrong thing. If you do it in a clever enough way, it's not going to blow it completely because we're not going to get everything either. Like we also don't get a perfect understanding of what's going on. We're hearing on the fly. We're not writing it down. We're not revisiting the VOD, etc. We won't even have necessarily VODs to go revisit, although one day I think that would be cool. That's actually kind of in the future again. It's not really something to worry about for right now. Even so, and this is one of the reasons I want the limited one, even in that world where only the analysts here, I want all analysts to be very, very careful about what they say. I've done this myself when I've mentioned things on the broadcast. I've been very vague and I've gave allusions, I've gave characterizations, I've talked about how it was a little bit like something I've speculated. Don't ever reveal a strat under any circumstances to anyone outside of that green room. Don't ever reveal to a player what that guy was doing in terms of something specific or a position that they were doing it from. When you do talk about on the broadcast, be very vague about how the calls are. And remember, it's just to inform you. And then from that, you're doing your analysis anyway. It's just to help you a little bit there. By the way, you don't have to take it on board anyway. You might disagree with some of the things and have a different perspective. It's mainly just informing yourself and doing your job better. And the doing your job better part is key if we want to sell these players to keep letting us do this. And we don't want them to all band together and go nuts and go, we got to get rid of this shit. Because I can tell you, it helped me a lot when I did Blast Premier Spring Series on LAN in London. And I got to hear FaZe Clan's comms. So I heard Nico IGLing and what Cold Zero did. So when every idiot fan was telling me, you don't know what he's doing. Look at interviews. Like I've literally heard him comm games, whole games. I also know things behind the scenes you don't. How about G2? They were banging out of control. But what was interesting was their comms were very chaotic. They were talking over each other or sometimes it didn't seem like people got the info entirely. OG, I literally realised this has cemented how good Alexi B is because it was when the others would make weird calls or the things were convoluted or he was a bit more silent that things would go to shit. Then they would do those grind back T-halves where he just took over and he was calming everything and sometimes he was even making like micro adjustments inside the round. Team Liquid. I was shocked that they were so impressive last year because when I heard their comms, it was like listening to a pug. I couldn't believe how messy they were and how little actual good info they got through the signal noise of like, he's lit, all that sort of shit. So this stuff was really, really valuable. And that was, again, just from a couple of events. So as a result, I can imagine what it would be like if we'd have heard all of Counter-Strike history like that. If we could hear all of the future of Counter-Strike like that. Now, I want to address this point. It's a very important one. I totally get why pro players don't want any of this out there. They don't even want us analysts to have it. They want it to be completely just them and their team and whatever admin had to listen to it. I get that. They just want to play and not have to worry about any info getting out there or some sinister character just leaking it to their opponent who might be like a friend of that analyst or something. Yeah, no, I get it. That would be worrying. Like if I'm a player, I'm a pretty skeptical person of others. I have trust issues with others. I wouldn't just think that they're going to be legit in that way. I also don't just want some analyst blurting something out on the air. If you go and watch the Flashpoint Q&A we did with Golden, respect to Golden, he might seem like a chill guy, but he made some very strong arguments. I think even decent arguments as to why he just doesn't want any at all. And it didn't matter that, listen, Monty was coming from the broadcast side, but we can make it better. No, it's like, I get it, Monty. I get why for him, he doesn't see the value. Now, listen, a better broadcast does help him in his career opportunities, but he's not going to instantly see that. And plus, we haven't built up the trust. We haven't shown him that we're loyal, that we won't betray him, essentially. So what I tried to do, basically, is just point out to Golden, like, listen, it can really help the broadcast a lot. Like, it can inform us. It can help us keep the game focused on the right topics. It can help us give proper credit to people who never get the credit in their teams. And this is the key thing. It's not like I want them cut out. Like, listen, we got your comms, so fuck you anyway. You signed the contract. No, listen, as I said on that episode, and I'm committed to this, I am willing to set up a system with teams and players in Flashpoint, the only tournament I'm involved with, where in the future, if you hear something said on the broadcast, or they ever show anything even vaguely close to the line on the actual real comms on a video, then you can contact us. And what will happen is, we'll have a process where you explain what you thought was out of line or what you were uncomfortable about, and then I'll look into that and I'll see if I agree. then I'll get it implemented. I'll make sure the guidelines are strict, or that person doesn't say something, or let's be a little bit more careful about how we phrase things here, guys. Because I want there to be really strict guidelines as to how we use this. Kind of like how I'm laying out here. Like, I want the analysts to have it. Like, I'm telling all my analysts, I ever find out you ever told like a piece of key info or a strat to some other team, I'm going to be very, very disappointed, and it literally could get you fired. Like, I'll consider not working with you again in the future. Because this factor, to me, with my analysts, could make them the best analysts in the world. So if you endanger that and you potentially get it all taken away from all of us, now it's not even just like you've disappointed me and let me down. Now I'll probably have to fire you for the sake of the integrity of the broadcast. Because there's another thing. I think the integrity of green rooms for analysts is incredibly key. The people who just go out there and say all that wild shit and tell stuff, that's fucked. So in my opinion, you have got to keep this comms issue especially tightly guarded. And so similarly, for production, what if there's some junior member of a production who can hear the comms and then they just tell their friend, oh, you won't believe this, or even, God forbid, ever like record something on a phone or something. That's the point. The message is out there to the Flashpoint production people. You will be fired if something like this happens. This is absolutely unacceptable. It's considered essentially leaking privileged information. And I even would like it in the future. Let's build it into the contracts. Let's make it like an NDA where you just agree you'll never let that out. And if you do, you can be held accountable in the courts potentially. And it could even cost you your pay, etc. I don't want to be in a scenario. Listen, obviously think about who Face It used to be. This is one of the areas I've tried to change things. I don't want some the fishiest dude bullshit where he even admits he was told some shit privately and then was fucking leaking it and trying to get attention for himself and done that behavior many, many times. I'm never going to be in that situation with the broadcasts I work on. And if I am going to ruthlessly enforce those rules. We're talking about firings. We're talking about people getting black marks on their reputations in this industry and being blackballed out of it. Like, this is not a joke. I understand where the players are coming from in this one. But at the same time, I also understand how good it could be for us. So I can promise you, on my end, there won't be any leaks. If there are from others, as I say, I will be ruthless. It will not be like, here's your first one. It's like, no, they can't be like that because one time could be one time too many. So in my opinion, this could really level up what we do with production. This could level up what the analysts' understanding of the game is like, how they talk about the game. We could go to depth we've never gone to, as long as we're very, very responsible. There is the key word. And we hold people accountable after the fact. They can't just fuck around and make mistakes. This isn't like the UFC where John Jones can poke you in the eye 3 times. He gets one warning and then he still just keeps doing it, but you have a fucked up eye for the rest of the fight. Like, that's the analogy I would give if you fuck up these comms. So I'm very excited for what they can do for the future. I've already seen hints of it. I've already seen the effect it can have on the analysts. I mean, I've seen the effect though it can have on the fans though if it gets out there. So this is my opinion on what we should do in terms of these comms and broadcasts. This video was kindly supported by Pronogo, Mohammed, Alabdul, Razzaq, Dean Tanglis, James Pederson, VatriSam, ErikHillestad, Andreas Kroknes, Hades, Zoomba Gaming, JDubs, Tobias Bernasconi, and Alexander Rao. Special thanks, as always, goes out to Jerky's Minion. Would you like to suggest a topic or a guest for one of my upcoming episodes? Maybe you want to ask more of those questions in that video AMA I do each month. Do you want teasers? Find out who the next guests are for my shows. Well, maybe you even want to take part in one of those crazy donated discussions where we go all over the place. If any of these perks appeal to you, or you want to support the channel, put your money where your mouth is and join the Skrilluminati today at the Patreon link in the description box below.